stuff to make sure that the people who have rented the campsite areas and things like that can get in and out back there while they are tearing up that section of the parking lot. We had an email that came in for one of our campers at the RV park referencing a breaker that had been going on and off. All the breakers were checked at the RV park. 2 of them had to be replaced. And the foot valve at the pond at Sunrise had to be replaced. Last time it was replaced was 7 years ago. And there was a stabilizing system that was put in place to keep it from hitting the bottom of the pond. The pipe that comes through from the water company is a flexible PVC, and it's constantly going like this, so they put a stabilizer in on each side of that to keep it from moving.
Officer reports, President. You're looking at the report is the local option sales tax town hall that's going to take place at 10 a.m. here at the Rec Center on June 18th. I would encourage everyone to get that word out. Ed Carson, the local community leader and business owner, will be presenting information about the local option sales tax that will be on the August primary.
As you can see, they've made a lot of progress on the parking lot. There were some errors in the striping part of the project. They added 6 handicap spaces that were really not designed to be handicap spaces. We're going to go back to having the two on the other side of the walk that we had, the 3 original on the other parking lot. They added 2 here at the ramp, which are totally impractical due to the slope of the ramp and the fact there's a turnstile there. You can't get anything through. And then they added 4 in the center parking lot, which is still impractical. And the way that happened, and I'm going to have to fall on my sword for that, I guess, is that the engineers looked at aerial photographs and they saw those hash marked areas and thought those, because there were trees on, there was still foliage on the trees when the aerials were taken, and they thought those were handicap spots, designated it as that, so the painters painted it that way on the drawing, and I did not catch it on the drawing, so I got to take heat for that. But all they're going to have to do is come back and spray some black on that, and they need to remark the one as you come up the walkway, the one on the left where there's a sign, handicap sign needs to be marked with striping. So they'll take those out with some black, they'll spray black on it and take care of that, because they're going to have to come back anyway. They painted arrows on the old pavement on the entry road. It's still going to have to come out. Pavement's not coming out yet, so they'll be coming back for that. And then other than that, that's all I have.
Let me come back to the treasurer's report. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the ECI to get the project status.
Well, thank you. Quick introduction of people on our team: myself, Jimmy Fell, Neil Johnson, Josh Tatum, Ryan McKnight. Going back to our contract executed February of this year, this board challenged us to come up with ideas to way to improve Holley by the Sea, and it's all in conceptual phase right now, so nothing that we have is actually going to be permanent because it's subject to change by your choice. I'm not going to sit here and spend a lot of time. I'm going to leave the majority of the time for Neil Johnson to give the presentation. Neil's our architect, Josh is our engineer of record, and Ryan is our design assistant. I'm business development. So after this, I basically will have to remove myself from any further dealings. And I know it breaks your heart, Yvonne, but these guys are the brain trust right now. So with that, I'm going to leave it to Neil. He's going to talk about your ADA, and he's going to go into 2 other conceptual designs that we came up for, which takes us all the way through exterior renovation for redoing the entrance and the floor plan. So I think you'll be impressed.
All right, man. Thanks a lot. I took the liberty to do a very simple little presentation agenda. I know some people like agendas. On the back side of that is we've got a series of about 14 slides that are part of this presentation that I'll give you a digital copy of. The back of it actually kind of gives you a description slide. In addition to that, one of the things they taught us is don't ever hand something out for something you want people to read. And this is really for your reading, because I'm going to go through everything in this little package right here. I'll have the digital for it. But if I could, just kind of go through these slides. Today, here's what we've done. We, of course, for those that know or don't, we had a kickoff meeting, talked about the property, history of the property a bit, some renovation, desires, something's been done, some hasn't been done. Really talked about some of the goals, or we'll call it goals and wishes and dreams. We looked at what original drawings we could get our hands on. I never found the original building drawings, but I was able to have a set of the last renovation project that was done here. You own us a set of those drawings, just to kind of get a look-see about how, where, why. It was always a history of those type of experiences. And then again, I came back and did another site visit where we documented the existing conditions and as potential ideas for relating it. Did a little bit of research. You know, every state's different. The United States, of course, is under the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. Florida in 1993 adopted an implementation of that act, more or less. I say more or less because it had a few tweaks in it, especially for large recreation facilities. Not really this facility, but like, let's say, Orlando and places like that had these giant recreation facilities. There were some interpretations there done. And then in Florida in 12, they passed an accessibility code. All states did. Florida has an accessibility code. Candidly, it pretty much mirrors the ADA with a few little twerks about specific building types. And then today, of course, we prepared this presentation for you. Just kind of take you, I don't want to back up too much or take a whole lot of time, but you know, a lot of folks, especially adults, when they understand the why, the what, seems to understand a little better. Why we do what we do, how we go about doing this. I'm not going to read all these words and go through every piece of it, but just let you know that when we look at facilities of this type, or any type, especially buildings that are, this is, even though it's called a recreation center, it's really a multi-use. You've got a large group of folks that have access and use this, and they all come for different reasons. They have other folks for being here. Some have guests, some don't have guests, some are, it's just them, some have families, some don't. So you've got a lot of different occupants of the building. Part of what for us to help you develop and take your ideas and put them into reality is to start out with understanding existing, to know what you know, and know, especially in a building that's been used and occupied. A lot of things may have changed since the building was originally designed, originally built. But to understand the spaces and their relationship to each other, you know, we don't try to shoehorn things, and some things are there because that's where somebody decided. Some things may have changed. And then, of course, when you're doing, in addition to a facility, you start looking at, you know, how can you envision this facility better support your customers you have now? So then we talk about the goals. You know, what do you want to get out of this? You know, what are the requests? Some are real hard lines, some are very factual, some are, let's just say, their dreams and their ideas of what could be. Next step for us, we gather the facts, we pull all this data together. We talk about the function. How does the space function? How does a user go from the front parking lot? How do they get on the side? How do they get in the parking lot? How do they get in the building? How do they get out of the building? How do they use the building? The form of it, what kind of shape it is. You know, as I think you might have heard, you know, we first looked at this, we said this building has really good bones. It's, you know, it's a good base, a good solid foundation, fairly logical, and I'll show you a slide of how we call it logical. It has a pretty decent form. It has an architectural element. It doesn't look like a lot of other buildings in the area. It may not look like a recreation center per se, but it has its own identity. So the form of the building kind of supports some of that shape. The economy of the building, you know, does it function? Is it an expensive building to maintain? Is it going to be an expensive building to add on to? Is it fairly simple to add on to? Or is it simple to renovate? A building with good bones usually is easier to renovate than a building that you got to start over sometimes when you go to renovate a building. And then time function is about how we gather this, what kind of time frame, how long has the building been built, how long has it been occupied as it is now, what are the changes, what are the future changes. We look at all four of those elements when we take a look at the building and then try to bring together all of your ideas and thoughts. Next step we do in our team, and of course did this with April and with Yvonne, talked about some concepts. You know, how's it work now? What works? What doesn't work? How can it be improved? Are there standards? Yes, there are standards for recreation centers, but again, the closer standards in this type of business is like a YMCA or facilities like that. They have a different mission, a lot of YMCAs, but you have a lot of common elements. You've got private health clubs, private facilities, they have a mission. So there are some industry standards. They're not as many for recreational facilities, short of typically a college campus might have recreational facilities that have a lot of similar elements, but their client and their market, which turns over every 4 to 6 years, does change. So, but you do still look at these standards. And then we're going to develop, as part of our agreement, we have what we call 3 concept designs, and I'll explain each one of those in a minute. You know, it's basically a compilation of the needs and how those needs could be incorporated into the facility as it exists now, and should it need to expand or modify or change, how those elements could be implemented into these designs. And of course, we're here today to present these designs to you. Part of what our initial mission in this project was, as it all to start, and I know some of this you may say, well, I know this, you may tell me something I don't know. We need to know what you know. We also need to understand what is actually happening in the building. So we do an inventory of the building. We look at the spaces inside the building. We look at how these spaces interconnect. We took this and broke it down to 3 main elements. You have the members area, the support area, which is all the things that support the members, and then the circulation. Every building has to have some circulation. This building has some pretty simple circulation. It seems to work pretty well. So we looked at all the different elements. And then now, nobody gave me this information, by the way. This is all based on some drawings I looked at and my observations of what I think happens in some of the spaces. You may look at some of these and go, oh wait, we don't do that there. Okay, it's all easy to modify, but it's again our observations and taking information from the drawings. Now, the first time we sat down and met and actually did some note taking, some of the requested improvements. And this is just a bullet point list of things that were discussed. You know, providing better accessibility to the spaces, not just for the handicap or the people that require accessibility through ADA and other programs, but just better access for the members also. We looked at the entrance, the restrooms, the weight room, the pool, all that. Looked at some possible changes or modifying the entrance, or even considering maybe looking at a new entrance. Especially one of the things we observed, which was, I think, no mystery to anyone, the member check-in at times, I'm sure, can become very congested. And so we looked at trying to help control that flow or better manage that flow. Looked at restructuring some areas, modernizing some spaces, looked at updating the restrooms inside and outside. And then thirdly, or the last one, which I think is kind of a separate piece from this presentation, which you guys all know about, the pool dome structure. So, from that, we also developed some questions just within our own team about, you know, these are traditional for any building, whether it's a facility like this or a building that is an office building or even a church or any type of building that has a lot of mixed use of different people that come into a space. You know, what is the current members' attitudes towards the space? They like it, they like to change it. Members change, this facility's been around for a bit. Members or the users, I guess, in terms of how they get to here may not have changed a lot, but a lot of them have changed and will continue to change as members leave and new members come in, and maybe their attitude might change some. We always have to prioritize first cost versus life cycle cost. You know, it's always could be less expensive going in, but they cost you a lot of money every month, every year to maintain something. And as we look at some of these potential improvements, we do take that into consideration. Some things are real simple to modify, some things do take quite a bit of dollar investment. Then we also talked about the different kind of spaces, again, because you do have, as we observed, you've got spaces that are, you got the entire gamut of members, adults, young adults, older adults, guests, some people don't have guests, and how all those folks work within the system are things that maybe they never use because it just doesn't fit their need or their desire or their use. And we also look at, in a space especially like this, typically we see places that we call a private place or a place you can just have your own little get-together if you want within the space, or spaces that just invite interaction between different groups just passing by, or maybe meeting here or showing up. So again, we look at that also. First thing out of our agreement, our assignment was to conduct what we call an ADA assessment, look at the facility and see how it is existing today, and prepare a report for that. In this handout I've handed out to you, it's actually a printout of every one of the slides you're seeing today. And about in the middle of it, right here in the back, is actually a hard copy, a print of what we call the ADA assessment. It's 14 pages long. I'm not going to go through every page of it. I'll be glad to with you. I don't want to put you to sleep, but candidly, the building's in really pretty good shape as far as even with ADA. There's some things that are, I say major, some things that are common with buildings of this type, this age, this use that I noticed and observed and reported on. And I'm going to go through that real quick is how I did it. Everybody, I don't want to bore you with what Title 3 is, but in ADA there's basically 4 titles, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Title 3 is a set of regulations that primarily focus on accessibility for buildings that are used by the public. A lot of people initially say, well, this isn't a public building because it's not owned by the public. Well, it's being used by what is still considered public versus private, even though you have to be a member to be here. Members can bring guests, people can come in and join. So in the ADA world, it's still considered a public use facility, even though somebody from the public can't just drive up and use the building. So the regulations for the rules, and it's actually rules and laws in ADA for a building similar to this that would be public versus, and like a YMCA is still considered a public building. A health club is still considered a public because it's open to the public is the way those rules are regulated. So you're under those regulations. They're not any difficult more than build a building similar to the site. In those regulations, though, especially for buildings that were built prior to ADA, which came around 1990, and it's still being used, you can look at 4 different priorities. And what they look at and what they ask you to consider when you're doing an assessment is how do you get in the building? What's the approach? What's the entrance? That's the #1 priority. Somebody can't get in the building, all the rest of the things really don't matter. The next item you look at is access to the services. How does somebody that's not real familiar with the building, how do they get around the building? Do they need some help to get around the building, or can they actually get into a building independently and get around the building? Next thing you look at is toilets, and that's the exact word that's in the regulation, is how can somebody use the toilet when they're here? Do they need help, or can they be independent? Because the whole idea of this regulation is mainly focused on somebody who has special needs, can be independent getting around a facility of this type. And it doesn't mean just wheelchair, it could be somebody just on crutches. It could be somebody that has eye problems or hearing problems, anything that is what's considered providing for accessibility. And then the 4th item just says access to other spaces. That means every space in a building that is available for everybody else to use, that person should be given the opportunity to be independently capable of using those spaces. But you're doing a series of priorities, and the priorities have to focus on when you have an existing facility and you do an assessment of where your issues are, what priority does the law require you to make those changes, which means you don't have to fix the toilet if you can't get the building. And there are certain other detailed specifics about how much money you have to spend, when you have to spend money, in terms of the prioritization of doing the actual work. So with that, first we start with the exterior. We look at how a vehicle parks, how a person gets out of the vehicle, how they get to a sidewalk, how they get to the exits. And it's all about the traffic pattern of somebody in a building when we're talking about approach and entrance. So it's approaching the entrances, approaching the exits, and of course actually when they get to the entrance, can they get in the building without somebody helping? And then inside the building, we looked at the 3 big items that are traditionally in ADA surveys, and yours is no different than anyone else's, and I make that statement in the report. The door hardware, the restrooms, which yours aren't as bad as most others, and then of course the signage that you have in the building, which is not a lot of signage, but the signage you do have is not traditionally 100% in compliance. So, by the way, I don't need to do it all. If you got any questions anytime, I'll be glad to answer. I'm going to kind of run through these pretty fast, and then we can take it, because one of the slides is questions, so if you have any questions. We first looked at, this is a floor plan of your existing building. We drew that. The colors are primarily designated in the type of uses that I showed earlier about how your customers or your members use the building, which very simply, the beige is the traffic circulation, the mauve or the purple is your office administration area, the light green on the left is the locker areas on the far right, what I call after-school crafts, and this is written there as multi-purpose, the gym up in the top right, and then what's called games area, I have come up with some name for some other, plus the food service is those areas in that brown. So what we looked at, and you won't be able to read that as well in the slide, and by the way, we have this slide up on the board too, so we're going to leave these boards with you. But we looked at 4 different areas. And if you see these circles in here, they're all 1, 2, 3, or 4. The 1s basically are the exterior doors. The 2s are the interior doors. The 3, you have 1 water cooler over by the janitor space, and of course there's another water cooler in the crafts. But that's a little different type of setup. And then 4 is the restrooms, and then even in the restrooms, because you've already made some modifications in your restrooms not too long ago, I separated the showers to what's called accessories, which is everything else you have in a restroom, from the toilet paper dispenser to any other paper towel dispensers, all those accessories in a restroom, I kind of broke those out. Those circles are all areas actually that now understand also, let me back up, ADA is all about path of travel and accessibility. So you'll see some doors in here, for example, that may not have a circle on them because they're not really in the path of travel. They really don't have any impact on directly somebody getting into a space. There are not many of them, but there are a couple. But for the most part, all of the exterior doors have some issues. For example, the hardware on some of the doors is too hard for you to pull on the door. A person that needs accessibility should not really. The only way that they would not need additional help is to have one of these automatic buttons you push that has an automatic door opener on it, which is not uncommon in buildings like this at the main entrance. But it takes too much pressure for that door to open, or they need somebody else to help them get to that door, or the space on the sides of the doors is not quite adequate for that person to be able to operate that door without somebody else's help. So that's how we look at those doors. The other thing is, if you've all seen in all the doors except your main front entrance, is that all those exterior doors have a step when you walk outside the door. That does not comply with ADA, especially with these doors. As you look at the traffic patterns, you know, again through here, of course out here and here, those are all considered paths of travel or traffic patterns that you really can't have a step. You're also supposed to have a level landing at least 60 inches square on both sides of that door. That's part of not only ADA, it's also part of life safety. You make some modifications like to this door here. Unfortunately, that modification physically works for people that are comfortable with it, but it doesn't comply with ADA, because as soon as you open that door, you go down that ramp. It's considered and called a ramp. I know it works, but I just want to share with you it's not 100% compliance, because you're supposed to have a level landing on the outside of the door as much as the inside, then you have the ramp. I would totally agree with you. In that condition, that's real awkward and would probably be uncomfortable for people, but that's what the rules say. So I'm looking at these from a very holistic point of view. We can talk later about how to prioritize them. By the way, in addition to all this information, I prepared what I think are pretty accurate construction cost estimates for each one of these different concept designs, which the first one, of course, deals with just ADA modifications. The second one is primarily interior improvements, and then the third one is interior and exterior improvements that we're going to present during this presentation. So, the primary areas on the exterior doors, obviously I mentioned the door hardware and the steps. The interior doors, primarily it's the door knobs. As you know, you changed some of the knobs to the lever handles. Even some of the lever handles that you have aren't 100% in compliance, because it's the pressure that requires that door to open by somebody, and they actually have a meter that you can measure that with. On the outside doors, it's 8.5 pounds of pressure maximum. On the interior doors, it's 5 pounds. And some of your doors require more pressure than that to open. It's a real simple thing to fix. Some of the doors, like where you have closures on some of the doors, there's actually a rule about how long it takes for that door to close. Some close faster than others. That's a pretty easy thing. You can usually adjust the closure. You just want the door not to slam into somebody. So there are little things like that on some of the interior doors. As you know, some of the interior doors, you're not having the proper hardware anywhere, so it's really just a hardware change out on some of those doors. The water cooler, for a facility this size, you really should have at least 2 water coolers, even by the code. Back when this building was built, it was only 1 required at that time, so that's probably why you only have 1. That's really what's considered accessible to the public. I know you have the other one in the, what I call the after-school craft room, yet the one down the hall here is okay, but in a facility this size with this many occupants, you really should have 2, and one of them should be low and the other one should be high.
And one at the gym also.
And there's one in the gym also. Again, that's not in the path of travel, but it does, and you know, you're absolutely, I remembered in my notes, but I don't think I showed it wrong, so. Anyway, and that's a little minor thing, it's not a big deal. The restrooms, I know you've done a lot of renovations of these restrooms, previously. There's still some out of compliance items. The toilet stalls actually do not 100% comply, even the handicap toilet is called. And it has to do with the hardware of the toilet stall. There's certain types of hardware that does comply. Probably, I'm going to tell you, probably when it was done, it was probably fine, and it probably passed if it had ever been checked. Things change, the rules change. The circulation in the restrooms, and again, I've got the other drawings. It's reasonably, actually, with this door open for this stall, by the exact definition of the code, you're supposed to have a 60-inch diameter circle. There are other kind of ways you can adjust that a bit to qualify for that. I know the laboratories have been modified, the ones that were built with the hardware for the wheelchair and the faucets. And parts of those do comply, parts of them don't, but I still address them as things that need to be modified. Most of the accessories, which are really just the accessories you have now, I call them, again, paper towel dispenser and things, they just, you don't, not all of them have to be handicap accessible, or that's a bad choice, we just use the word accessible now. But one of them has to be, every one. So you don't have to move them all, but you at least have one that works. And it has to be identified as capable for people to do that. So, I listed earlier in the report also, I don't have the slide of it with me, I'll just tell you. But in the report, the first part of the ADA assessment is from the outside. I'm just going to walk you through those. I think, Rod, you already talked about some of them with some changes and some things with the parking and signs. The 3 main things, or 4 main things that are in the report that I observed. Number one of the challenges in your parking lot is not having the sidewalks on the top side, we call it, the parking places. ADA doesn't require you to have those sidewalks, but it strongly discourages for somebody who's in a wheelchair to get out and have to go behind all the cars to get to wherever they need to go. It's not a requirement, but it's strongly discouraged to not have to do that. You don't have a lot of sidewalks out in these areas. But you got plenty of land, and it wouldn't be that hard to at least have some of those areas modified to be able to provide accessibility. It is kind of unique out of the park, and I know you commented about even some hiccups and the restriping, but it's kind of scattered the way the handicap is shown and painted in some of the areas. I don't really know the logic behind that. They don't like you to have them all in one place, but they like to have most of them closest to wherever the entrance to the facility is going to be. And it's not unusual you see in some facilities just to line them up. Customers don't like that because they're designated and that's your prime parking places. So the rules don't say you got to have them all at the front, but it does recommend you get as many as you can that is practical to get closer up to that front entrance. So even once you get out of the car, one of the things I noticed that I didn't see a van accessible parking space, which is a little different than a regular handicap parking place. It requires an 8-foot wide aisle, 8-foot wide aisle, and then there's 2 places on the other side. Now that place, parking doesn't have to be the full 9 or 12 foot, it can actually only be 8 foot. So you can take 2 regular parking places and make 2 wheelchair plus the space in between. It's not going to be easy to do. I didn't go out and measure all the places, but just observing what's here now and looking at the drawings from before, that would need to be incorporated. That's really just a striking thing. And of course the signage for those places, we need to identify those as van accessible only. And you got to have at least one of those for a parking lot of this size. You do have the proper number of spaces. Clearly, in fact, you're over the number you need compared to the size of the parking. My gut feeling is the parking is still limited in terms of the total parking. You're complying with the code according to our analysis, but it just felt like it was small compared to the number of folks that potentially use this building. So, The other thing is, of course, once a person gets to this area, and you're gonna look at it and say, you know, I've been using it for a while, I probably could get to it, and when you go to measure it, there's some very specific slope requirements, ramp requirements, level requirements, and I just have to tell you that none of the walkways meet any of those requirements. They're too steep, or they're actually on a ramp without rails and all those things, or even the main one that comes all the way around to the front is relatively flat, and I think most people that has some type of accessibility needs could get to the front. And I don't know if you have active members now that are either in a wheelchair, or they walk with a cane, or maybe they are blind, or they have a dog, or they can get to the door. I don't doubt that. You've got some foundation issues where that sidewalk is kind of cracked up. The challenge is it's not as level as it should be to be in full compliance. I'll also tell you that it's very hard to do with those stones. Those stones are beautiful and they're nice, but it's very hard to get that plane with those stones, unless you set them on a better concrete. And that's been done in some places, but you still got all that texture. And too much of that is just as much a challenge to be in full compliance than, you know, not having enough. So those are a couple of things we look at. Because on the surface, when you walk and you drive up and you walk all the way here, it seems like it'd be very logically for somebody to get into this building without the need of any other assistance. And I think if somebody, I don't know if you've ever had a claim filed, but if you ever had a claim filed, I think you could probably argue that, you know, it is compliant to the extent that someone couldn't get into the building. But I will tell you about the exact letter of the rule, and the rule is like 1 in 48 levels. That's pretty level for a sidewalk. You know, slope of 1 to 20 for a ramp, where some of your ramps are like 1 to 8. And I know you've seen them, especially as you come out. The challenge also is, as I appreciate it, certainly correct me if I'm wrong, everybody comes into here that comes into the building, and some leave out this way, and then some go out through the turnstile. That turnstile, because it's your second exit, for the most part, is not accessible. I think it's pretty obvious. There actually are turnstiles, because they have amusement parks, that have the same function, but they're fully accessible for somebody in a wheelchair, or blind, or somebody with a dog, or somebody with some help. So there are products on the market that can do that. And I've got one priced in the cost estimate, if you want to have to consider something. Again, as you remember in that first slide early on, when you do these, you got those 4 priorities. So keep that in consideration when we look at all the opportunities we said, we'll call it, for improvement. And that, again, as I talked about, this is a cover of ADA assessment. It talks a little bit about things I just mentioned to you, the why and the how, and how do you get there. Then I also talked about the approach of how we did the assessment. I've got each one of the areas from the exterior, from the vehicle entrance, and I've got photographs. When I describe the space, I've got a photograph of that area that's in there, even to the signage and the sidewalks, through the turnstile. And then I go into the interior of the building. This is, of course, that photograph of the door out there. And then I go into the interior with the doors. And I go through each one of the spaces and talk about the different levels of accessibility. And then I have a summary at the end, or overall observations, which shows everything that was covered. Any questions on that part?
In talking about the handicap parking spaces, the number of parking spaces that are required to be handicapped, is that based on the total number of parking spaces for the entire structure, or is it based on an occupancy issue?
It's both. You first start to develop the number of parking places you need to determine what the occupancy, maximum occupancy building is. And that number tells you how many parking places you gotta have. And then from the total number of places, then a certain percentage of them have to be accessible spaces. So one drives the other. And again, in a building like this, some people look at this as a business occupancy. And a business occupancy is very simple, straightforward. It's one person for 200 square foot. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think we're about 19,000 square feet. Something like that. Overall outside dimensional building. So you just do that math and get a number. Well, in a building like this, you really got a mixed occupancy, because you have this space that's not just like an office, but then you do have offices, and you do have locker rooms, and you do have the fitness rooms. And there's no hard, fast rules for like fitness rooms, but you know as well as I do, you put a lot of people in that room, just like you put a lot of people in here. Different than an office, which is like on average, 1 to 200 square foot. And so, but you do that math, so we looked at the minimum occupancy, the maximum occupancy, and then we looked at your parking. And I know you have other parking on the properties, and the good news is for your occupancy, you can add up all the parking together. It's not just the parking you have right here. So, and then again, you take a percentage of that for accessible places.
I guess my question is, before I get the guys back in, to take some of these away and recycle, I need to know how many I need to have.
Yeah.
When you first looked at the building, it was before these others were designated.
Right.
So when you first looked at the building, other than the fact that one needs to be van accessible, was that a sufficient number?
Yes. Quantity wise was sufficient. What my initial concern was, but they were scattered all over the parking lot.
Well, actually, you're right.
Well, there was some back on the back side, wasn't there?
No, there are now.
Yeah.
They put a bunch in the center.
In the center, and I saw two on the far side, when maybe I misunderstood.
There weren't.
Okay.
What we originally had was 5 spaces.
Right.
2 immediately adjacent to the walkway.
The walkway.
And then 3 in this parking lot right here.
Yeah.
That are just opposite the wall.
Right.
For a total of 5.
Right.
So that would be sufficient.
Quantity wise, yes. Correct. Again, the challenge of walking behind the cars is a real problem. I tell you,
Yeah,
we had that in my
I
church.
don't know that there's any way around
We
that.
put a sidewalk in front, especially on the ones right out here. You just have to build sidewalks to allow them to get from the car parking spot to the sidewalk.
That would only accommodate
Those two right here.
those two right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Because the others are on the other
Right.
side. of the
Well,
park.
one consideration is look at that whole road, and I know from a public PR, it's like, is to designate that whole road and restrike that as accessible only. And just make that your only accessible parking place. Not very popular, I can tell you. What I will tell you some facilities do is they designate some for handicap only, which means you gotta have a sticker or a license or both. And then they do some they call them elderly, so they're the same sizes, but they just kind of blend in with the same area, but anybody can park it. It's something I've seen other facilities do.
But the walking behind cars is an option.
It's an option, yeah, it's not a law, it's just strongly discouraged. And it's not so much somebody in a wheelchair, candidly, because they can't, and I have friends, they're well aware of it. It's the folks that have a walker, that just they're not as mobile as somebody in a wheelchair, or especially somebody that's blind. Because they're trying to feel texture with their walking stick. And they don't really know where they are until somebody helps them get around where they're going. That's the biggest challenge. Wheelchairs are not the issue of those, especially when you have a van accessible space, which a lot of people in wheelchairs, especially if they're independent, they have a van that's accessible, and so they're used to that, because they get out on the side and come in the building.
And you said that needs a 12?
It's an 8 and 8 and 8. It's 24 feet, but you have 8 foot, an 8 foot aisle, and then another 8 foot. You have two places that shares an 8 foot center aisle versus a 5 foot aisle.
That's 8, and then the aisles on either side are how
Can
many?
be 8. 9 is
Say
recommended, but you get, they came up with that because a lot of places were 12 foot. So you take two 12 foot places and make 3 8 foot areas. And most vehicles can fit in an 8 foot. And then you have the 8 foot space for the wheelchair, for the.
So it's a 24 foot.
The 24 foot of area is totally very legal. And it's just an 8 foot right there. Yes, sir. You're required to have at least one of those.
We're supposed to have one, and I believe it's the first spot the sign is out there now, if it's not been restriped the correct width.
Yeah.
We need to look at that,
But there's no aisle on the left side of that.
if, when you walk down the ramp, it is the very first one to the left. So I believe that it has the,
I don't think it has one on the right side.
You gotta have at least that 8 foot on the right side. You don't have to have the other one for an accessible place, but most people do because it's there already. when you're reconfiguring from a regular parking place. Because rarely do people add on to parking places when you modify an existing place. But, so that's how you get by with the 8, 8, and 8, because most regulations, and I don't know the exact rules in this county, but I gotta believe, and y'all know that they're usually at least 8.5 or 9 minimum for a parking place, just for regular cars. Now, accessibility has a separate set of rules for that. That's how you get by with the 8. Okay? All right. And that's kind of the part of what we'll call, for the lack of, I guess, better definitions, we call it concept 1, which is, of course, the ADA assessment survey and the things that you need to look and consider. Again, some of these are as simple as changing door hardware. Some, you got some work to do. A couple of these exits, especially the ones that head out in the center, I'm not even sure, I'm pretty sure we could work it out, but it would be pretty expensive, because that path of travel from the time you got that door to a paved, that has to be all hard surface. You know, the two that come out these ends, they're kind of like emergency exits. You don't need all those exits for this building, because you've got a really good spline of travel. You know, that certainly fixed up right there would easily qualify. Exits have to be readily readily accessed, it has to be obvious. It's a little challenge when you got multiple doors, but you got an exit light there, so it's, you know, for people that are looking for an exit, they know where it is. And then you got this exit, even though it's a little bit of a challenge with your turnstile, because it's really not designed conveniently to exit these numbers of people. But then you have exits out of these rooms, which you can't exit from a room, through a room, into another room, out, but you can certainly exit from that room out, and that certainly qualifies. But you've got a real good spline as far as the path of travel. So, but all those step downs are in violation.
I do have a question about, the locker room, there in the big locker room, there's actually, there's a door here and a door here.
Yeah, it's there, it just doesn't show them through
And those are not an issue?
I don't remember, I thought they had push handles on, but correct me if I'm wrong, they're always unlocked. I don't think they're hardware.
Actually they do that.
I don't think there's a handle.
No, they're not, they're
just push.
bars.
To
A
go
bar.
outside, yes. they-
Yeah, I don't remember a handle there.
There are.
So
So that's okay. The pressure on it probably, because they're probably
Need
more
adjustment.
needs adjustment, because that's a big deal. You just don't want the door slamming somebody, and you don't want to take more than 8 pounds if it's an exterior door, 5 pounds interior to open. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but it is actually if you go measure it.
Same issue on the women's side.
Yes. Same issue on the women, yes. We got a real good solution. All right, any other questions? We're gonna move to what we're gonna call concept design 2. Now, concept design 2 was taking the building as it exists now, evaluating the spaces as they're occupied now, and making some suggestions. Solution does look at considering where the current offices are now, converting them into men's and women's, I'll call them private areas, that could be called lounges. This could certainly be a space with a card table and some sitting areas. This could be closed off with a door, could have a big screen TV there, some chairs to watch games and things. The ladies would have a similar space. There could be cards and other things there. So the flow in this solution would come in from this side over here into here, coming through here. The traffic pattern is very similar, except somebody that just say is going to play tennis, the way I've set this up is actually have some locker areas just for tennis players with some private dressing areas that have screens and curtains. People with kids especially seem to like those a lot, or anyone, just have a private dressing area. And to go back into this space and go to the tennis or wherever without ever going into the rest of the building, or having to circulate through the building, or actually through the same kind of direction now. I actually did not designate it in a sign, but those locker areas right there would potentially could be for ladies, for just tennis. Some people like that separated. Those are kind of optional things. I did separate and totally isolate the steam and sauna, which is up in this area now here and here, having separate ladies and men's. The janitor closet is really the only thing in this layout for the most part, stays in the same place as before. Again, as you come through this area and you take out, I'm trying to see them on the screen, that doesn't go well. Where the food service is now, I got the impression or the feedback is not well utilized, not utilized hardly at all. It's actually an optional space. What I did was take about half of it down to use for this space for enlarging this. It even could get bigger. If it's a thought process, it's not even necessary at all. It can certainly be reconfigured, but I looked at making it a little more attractive. Still having a small food prep area and some seating area in this area. Of course, this is all loose configuration. It could be done with different types of furniture arrangements. Again, one of the big also changes is where the admin offices are here now. Just to look at putting them right here. It's, again, connected to the client. Also, we incorporated a conference room here, some offices and spaces. This area that I would call designated right now is the HOA architectural office. It's still exactly the same square footage. In the site plan, you're going to see the idea that potentially having that built as a separate standalone building out at the front entrance where you come in, independent of inside this building. And so one of the things I looked at was, okay, we're going to suggest consideration to have a men's and a ladies lounge. That's sort of a private area, semi-private, semi-public. But possibly the teenage or the young adults would have that same kind of space, or youth. Well, on the right, didn't do a whole lot there in the design, even though in the cost estimate, I have some dollars allocated to modify, update, and just kind of clean those spaces up where they need to be cleaned up. So what I'd like to do is take this part, when we go to presentation 3 or concept 3, which incorporates a lot of this, plus the things on the outside, we'll go through all those slides, and then we can come back and talk about specifics within the spaces. So you're going to see this exact floor plan, basically for free. Now here's a site plan for free, as we'll blow this up so you can see there. As we talked about, the footprint of the building literally stays identical, except right here is where that space closes in right now. That ends right here. We're looking at or proposing a covered walkway connecting with what we call a porte cochere or covered drop, as the traffic can come into the space from here. And all this is existing, and pretty much in this layout, what we lose is these places, these few places here. You come in, you have a covered drop, or if you're not dropping, you still continue through and parking. For the most part, for this exercise, we just left that existing as it's shown in the drawings now. I didn't go scale verify every square footage, every space. I mean, this is a space that could be considered for the, what I'm calling, I may have it misnamed, but HOA administration, the architectural office building. Other improvements, would certainly involve getting from the land area here to this elevation here. So you'll see it in the other drawings, some steps that go from here to here, and then some ramps that would be fully accessible. You get to that space for the walkway that would continue around here. We're proposing in this solution to have a walkway there. So again, any folks that would provide that access to get into the space. As you saw in the floor plan before, a lot of the traffic circulate here and go out, or circulate here. We still want to kind of investigate how does a tennis player get back to that area potentially without going through the pool area. That's pretty much an exercise in itself. One of the things, and I'll let Ryan talk about in specific, was, okay, you got a beautiful, gorgeous architectural element front entrance to the building that just is not very functional. It's nice, it has a stately element to it. So we looked at, even just at this again, the concept stage, what could we do with that space that could make it nice and attractive and usable when you're not going to use that space to get into the building and get out anymore. We'll show you that and then more specific, and Ryan will explain these thoughts and concepts with that itself. So with that, here's a view of what that porte cochere could look like as you're in the parking lot walking up. As I mentioned to you, you would have these accessible ramps and the sidewalks. You'd have these steps. Now, we just kind of guessed the grade. We thought it was about 30 inches between the parking area and the slab height. That's probably pretty close. But again, someone providing drop-off, going up into the steps, and going into this entrance here, a nice, well-planned landscaped area, plus with the accessible ramps. And of course, this would be the new wall for that front lobby entry.
And that roof won't leak.
And that roof, kept in the same material, same roof line, same slopes. Jump the slide, guys, you can see.
You there?
No? That's right, we're not on the floor plan for 3, it's 2. I'm sorry, I thought I had another call. I'll back up to that again just to show how those steps would be, out here, you come up and you put some ramps that come here and enter into this space and then allow you to progress through the rest of the space. And again, this would be the view of that space through there. I've got included in here individual sheets of these cost estimates. I broke out each one of them as I mentioned to you, between concept 1, 2, and 3. Concept 1, to do all of the, what I'll call the ADA assessment. And these are just budget numbers. These aren't quotes. I didn't get hard dollar numbers or anything, but they're good experience numbers. We got to revise the walkway, how you get into from the parking lot to the space, the ramps. Probably look at even reconfiguring the ramps, but no matter what, the ramps would need some railings and things of that nature. Revising the pool exit turnstile under this scenario, because nothing really is being done to the outside. Looking at some new signage, and then on just the interior, you're doing all the landings, changing door hardware, exterior doors, interior doors, restrooms, signage, accessories. And then I've got some dollars allocated, actually, I didn't mention it, but the restroom outside here by the pool office, I've got a design and some budgeted money to renovate that space, to take basically those 3 and make them 2 nicer, better accessible restroom in the back of the space. So that's the number I'm coming up with for a budget number for these. Again, this is the whole picture of everything that you would need to do. As I mentioned to you early on, you don't have to do all these at the same time. You can prioritize these, and as long as you're making the effort. If you ever got tagged by someone saying, hey, this space is accessible, I'm going to file a claim, which I would hope would happen, since your members all your members. But you could have a guest that could come. You could have a guest of a member that could file a claim. Anybody can actually file a claim. They could come on apply for membership and not get in the door and file a claim. It's pretty frivolous in a lot of areas, but it's what I do for a living in some parts. But as long as you're making an attempt and you've documented that attempt and you have a plan in place, you're literally in compliance, because your building is not that grossly out of compliance. And you've got enough staff here, something also to consider under ADA, as long as you have staff available to assist somebody to do things, that means you don't have to ever fix the stuff, but you would be in compliance that day. For example, valet parking actually complies with accessibility if you don't have a parking place at the front door. You can have valet parking, and technically that qualifies. As long as that person, wherever they park, or they get out and they go park the car, that's an example of a very common thing in a restaurant, for example. They may not have accessibility parking right at the front door. So I don't want you to think that you have to do all these at one time, but that's kind of an impact cost of what you should consider to do them all. The second item here is concept 2. Now again, there's a part of this included in this estimate to add this front addition in. I want to be clear that addition does not have to be done under this concept. Could be, and I think it would be nice. We could still modify that concept 2 without doing the addition in the front. I say the front, the new front. This number does include parts of that though. But here's an idea, and again, these are budgeted numbers. You can see all kind of variations of prices per square foot for areas that are just painted and tuned up versus like in the locker area, 65 square foot. That's pretty much a gut rehab for that space, meaning take everything else with all new finishes.
Does this one include the new architectural office standalone, or is that?
Yes, in this scenario, I have a number listed right here for the new HOA office at about 135 square foot for that building. Because if you took this consideration design, that space would be used for something else. But understand, again, the way it's designed, if it's the choice that says, maybe not now, maybe later, that space pretty much could get just repainted and used as it is now, the accessibility and the circulation, all that still exists. Might get a little more challenging because now the front door's over here, they would be here, but there's some things could be worked out. Included in these costs is your big picture numbers, including a 10% contingency, including AD fees, GSA fees, permitting, and construction testing. So it's kind of like a global budget number for all in, except if you have to borrow money. That's the only thing we're in, pretty much.
So is this concept designed to include everything for design one?
Yes. Yeah.
Where is that cost?
Well, in all these internal renovations, like new walkways, in all these areas, when these spaces are renovated, those doors and those hardware will get renovated also. So all the interior, all the exterior doors, we wouldn't have to redo the sidewalk in front because it wouldn't exist anymore. It would be in that site demolition area. But we would be doing some new work coming into the front. I mean, through the new entrance.
Giving a discount because the women's lounge is one of the stars of events?
How did that happen?
Right for.
Missed it by 2/3.
Yes.
This wall right
That's
here.
an easy wall.
This wall is very moving. Y'all watch. It's actually what's called a non-load bearing wall. It could be anywhere. And in actuality, the space could even be that big.
There's on the men's side, you had to have stadium seating, so that's really what.
That's what took that space up. And then
We get the little corner TV.
one person has working. No, you have to flat screen. But the bridge games usually a little bit less than the carpet.
But the women's lounge will smell so much better.
I don't see a humidor in there.
No. Oh, yeah. That's in this piece of furniture. Actually, at one of the sketches, we had this closed off the doors, and then one of them had it here where you were entering here. I mean, all that's real flexible. These are just ideas and concepts, the things that don't exist here now that maybe your members are asking for, maybe you want to consider.
But the challenge Neil took on was trying to create new space without adding.
Without adding a lot of any square footage at all, other than, we tried to work that entrance without adding on. We just kept wanting to square it off to make it logical, and the space would have just been outdoor into space, and it really looked like it just worked so much better because I couldn't do that larger reception area. So that's kind of how that developed. And then of course the radius just kind of became what we call a tension point. It drew people, when they walk in, if you didn't have any signs, they ought to know where to go. And I mean, they do here, but they got a barrier that tells them where to go. Without it, you could potentially, that's what part of good solutions would provide. The other challenge is somebody coming in who's just, looking around. I mean, somebody that's new to the area versus somebody coming into the space to go in, they know where they're going, they check in, they go. There's not that crossover as much as in the interaction space. This is, again, we're just in concept stage. This wall is solid. You could have a lot of graphics and other things. This is shown as solid. This is shown as glass. This could be glass. All those kind of things are very flexible right now. And the budget numbers that I have allocated there at this stage of the design could be either way you'd like to do it. So the numbers that I'm working with for all three, which would entail all the ADA work, all the parking work, the addition, interior and exterior. This includes the porte cochere and also the front courtyard. I'll call this in the front here, the front courtyard renovations, plus a reasonable, I'll let Ryan respond to that, budget for landscaping. This is what we consider everything that we discussed. Again, the format of these three estimates is identical from the hard costs, which is construction dollars, exterior additions, interior. This one also includes the restroom, pool renovations in the back, HOA architectural office. We got 10% contingency, and then the fees coming down to the total. And even when you do the math, and it wasn't intentional, it wasn't, but we were able to look at something under $100 square foot. Now, I'll say that, qualify that even these numbers, this locker room, At 85, I've done YMCA's that were $200 a square foot in the locker room. There's a lot of variations in how you finish out lockers, from the toilet fixtures, all finishes. But I think for 85, with the bones of the building are here, and the air conditioning is in here, and the electrical's here, a lot of those things don't have to be gutted and started over. The services are here. Obviously, you get new lights, you get new ductwork and all that. But I think that's a pretty reasonable number for that space, for that configuration. So, let's see. And again, this is what our vision of the entry could look like. All materials would be similar: the stucco, the masonry, the roof lines, and pitches. Our goal would be to provide a solution that looks like it's been here within 6 months, like it's been here for a long time, and not just stuck on. And everything just kind of blends in. This slide is, what's typical in a presentation of this is, what's an action plan. We all gotta have action plans, where we go from here and how we're gonna get there. You got these 3 options to consider. The time frames are always an important part of that. Your fully occupied space. It's not unusual to do these type of projects in phasing. It's a challenge, especially for management, to do it there, but it can be. And again, because you got really good structure, based on everything I've seen so far, that areas could be done and still maintained. Whenever the next design phase would come through, you would actually do a phasing plan on how you can maintain the building occupied. A lot of times, especially for the admin, you go in the trailers for 6 months or a year, because that's a function that eventually you gotta get that stuff out, but you can never not be without administration. And it's not unusual for that to happen in facilities like these. So, but that would be part of that next phase or the next task, to work out a phasing plan so that your members realize there are a lot of improvements happening, but they still can utilize a lot of the things while they're already here.
Your cost estimates, do they include the facilities that go along with moving the office, the internet accessibility, all the Cat5 wiring being moved? And
I think pretty close. And I didn't do a study of what you have now, but just assuming and kind of visually looking at what you have, from the fire alarm, or the emergency lights and those things, and all the digital work.
Are any of these modifications going to trigger any requirement for fire suppression systems? No,
as long as we can maintain these exits. A lot of times, a fire, like a sprinkler system, you have very little combustible material here anyway. Mostly steel and hard surface, in the structural part. Sprinkling this would run probably another 60,000, 70,000, assuming there's water service available. The beauty of that it provides is it allows you to eliminate a lot of your exits. You don't need as many exits, and the travel distance doubled to get to those exits when you sprinkle a building. If this is built today, it would be sprinkled. Since you're not changing occupancy, and we probably have to study that with the code a little bit, it's my interpretation of today that it wouldn't have to be, just because you're not changing the occupancy of it. And it was built in compliance, and it was built without it. So if you built it today, you would have a sprinkler. Just this space would require sprinkler system, because this is called small assembly. And anytime you have this many people potentially in a space, you got this type would have to be sprinkled. Or you got to put all those fire doors and all those kind of things that you would have. I think that's the last slide. So
let's touch on at this point, after if they have any questions, because they still have more board meeting duty to do. And correct me if I'm wrong, but we are running close to our time.
It's about 10 after 7 now.
Okay. Point them in the direction of where they need to go from here, to kind of advise us on what we need to do for them.
Yeah, what's the next step?
Y'all need to make some decisions. That's the next step.
This is a major undertaking. I can tell you this project here, the day you say go, it's probably 2 years before it's done. You got to realize that. Anything less than that, and I would be a little nervous, but I think I'm pretty close with the 10% contingency, because on the visual it looks great. There's a lot of things that, and y'all do a great job taking care of a building like this. I'll tell you, because we do this all the time, and we don't see buildings this well maintained. You got there may be some hard behinds on the walls we don't know about. Utilities can always be an issue. I've got some money in there to relocate utilities, because you always run into utilities when you bring in a new entrance, especially when you got slopes. Sometimes those pipes are supposed to be 4 feet underground and they're 8 inches underground. And you gotta move, you know, stuff like that. Especially when you got pools and pool equipment, even though I think most of that's out there. But you gotta realize it's at least a 2-year effort. I mean, 9 months probably just in the final planning, design, bidding, permitting, start construction. And depending on how you want to phase the job, you know, you could be at least 12 to 16 months of construction. No less than probably a year for construction. That's if you vacate the building. But I don't think so. I don't know anybody else would. Nobody's ever said, yeah, well, we can move out. But I think for sure the admin would probably be located, I say off-site, outside the building in a trailer, because they gotta stay in function through the whole thing. At some point, you gotta take the space out. You don't wanna do it on Monday, because you always got something to do. And I think you got spaces, starting at land space.
If you're gonna build the building out front, you could potentially build that first, move out there temporarily.
You could take the HOA office initially, because it's a little bigger than the space you got now, we got laid out. We're not gonna get into those details, what your needs are today, what your needs are in the future.
Can we take parts and pieces out that we want or don't want in different, because to me, it looks like it's in different phases, but
Yeah.
if we wanted to do the front, you know, conception 1, but add maybe the front entry that's in concept 3 to start, can we do that kind of a thing before we go? Or is this set up so that?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Obviously, the biggest challenge is the locker rooms. And then for the locker room you can rent, you know, I mean, they do it, it's been done before, I don't know if that's even practical. That's some feedback we need from you, you know, but at some point you gotta go out and redo them. The rest of it is pretty flexible space, for the most part. As you can see in these other ones, on the far right, you know, I'm not suggesting this time, I didn't get any feedback, I didn't see any real big issues that any wholesale changes would occur there.
In what section?
Like the multi-purpose or the fitness gym or those areas.
Well, they probably just want to do some different things, like that section, you have the bottom where you've got a youth section on the bottom.
Yeah.
And the top part where it's red that's connected to the gym, we would probably want to open that up and make it gym space as well.
Could be.
If it just changes like that or be
Yeah.
something that I can.
Sure.
Y'all, it's y'all's building, whatever you wanna do, you can do. That's where we just, and I know decisions aren't gonna be made tonight on exactly what.
Well, and I've got some numbers, like I got 96, they say, whoa, I gotta have 200 lots. Or I've got 58 there. Now, those were just random numbers. They were somewhat of what I looked at, and I didn't do a whole count, but I looked at it and tried to calculate it. They said, I gotta have 100 of these. And that happened in the next phase. You got enough flexibility in the building to be able to do that. Or you may say, I gotta have 150 of these, or, you know, I gotta have 2 more toilets or something. You know, everything I'm kind of showing there is minimal. You may say, you know, we talk about private dressing, but not people really don't need that. Well, I certainly need some more locker area. Or you may say, our tennis folks don't need this. And that could be other parts of the locker. So I've seen places where this became like family locker area, you know, just designated, and just people use it, especially by private dressing. And I don't know your demographics that well, but I know other clubs and YMCA's and other recreation centers. Those are things we see in a lot of places that I didn't see here. But certainly, a big piece of the next part of the design would be, after the design is tightened up or modified, is to really look at that space. You know, how would that progress?
Yeah, of course.
Ma'am? No, I mentioned earlier when I did the graphics, it should have said tennis locker right there for the ladies. No, it's just a typo, right on the screen.
It really comes down to budget, phasing, right, and what you're expecting, what you wanna do. I mean, this is really a blank canvas, but ideas that function within the playground that the sandbox we've been established, right? So,
didn't do, and I hate to end on what I didn't do, but we don't even talk about, should the building be a lot bigger than it is now? I didn't get the impression that you're jammed up in here. I just didn't, for the numbers of members. I didn't get that impression, I didn't get that observation. You may say, look, we gotta have twice a lot. We gotta have twice of something else. Or here's some things we offer that we don't have space for. I tried to work within the parameter of the building because it's an economical way to do it. But certainly that's some other stuff.
How long would it take just to do the ADA, the first concept?
90 days probably. And some of that because you can't do it all at one time because you gotta maintain the access to it. It's all handwork stuff. No major demolition,
Fit and
major
finish.
equipment.
Fit and finish.
Yeah, exactly.
The other thing to think about is if you're moving towards design concept 2, do you really want to do design concept 1 that you're going to be tearing back out? You aren't going to keep
Not a
it.
salvage.
Right.
I got 3 questions, if I may.
Okay, easy ones now. We don't.
No, they're not easy, I'm sorry. I'm Bob Hutchison, I'm the chairman for the Architectural Control Committee, and I'm coming to the party a little late, so I don't know what the charter, your right and left aiming states, as we say in the military, were that were given to you. So I guess my question is, if we go to number 2, and in the sake of brevity, because I know we're running short on time, but maybe you can get the answers to April there. But for the concept number 2, you're talking about all this work in the restrooms there. How much downtime are we looking at having the facility, or at least those restrooms closed for the residents? That's number 1. Number 2, with your concept number 2, what efficiencies are we gaining? I mean, other than the portico. I mean, I like that, okay, which is part of number 3. If that portico was moved to the front and incorporated into the fountain out there, etc., put in a separate driveway, I mean, how would that change the dynamics of what you were proposing in design number 2? Again, I'm not looking for all that right now, but just some things I could.
I think I can address the last question.
Okay.
With the functionality of the space here is pretty inefficient. You know, for example, today we've got the youth program. There was 5, 6, 7-year-olds walking by the general maintenance or the general manager's office, and of course these office space, and they're loud. They're 5, 6, 7, and one of them, I'm sure, accidentally gets the door and the alarm goes off. So one of the things we wanted to do was to separate the administrative from the activities that go on. And that was why you've got that building, the HOA admin building, which then opens up all this space here to reuse that space in a way that's more conducive to what's already here.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So that was what we talked about, is how best do we use the space? Because there is a lot of space in this building, but some of it doesn't seem to be well used or designed, if you will. You know, like expanding the gym. You know, if you've got this area on the north side, the after-school youth lounge, then that after-school crafts, that can become an expanded gym.
Right.
Because there are times, you know, to make it accessible as well. So when people come in, whether they're in a wheelchair or not, there's more space, there's more equipment, it increases the capacity, but it also allows members to, who right now maybe can't, to use that. So that was the thinking,
Okay.
you know, of it. And then also just the entry point, as beautiful as the north side of the building is, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to walk all this way.
Well, yeah, and
So,
I mean, that's why I like the portico. It's right, you know, with the idea, it's right there by the lot, so.
Well, just real quick, in looking at the site plan and the surveys and all that, to bring that into this front and the traffic circulation, there would be a lot of money that would not be used except for that function. And then I wasn't sure, I couldn't tell actually from the survey really what that actual setback was. And in there, going back and forth, it just didn't seem practical.
Okay.
Even though it's a nice looking front, it just didn't seem the practicality. Plus, putting this onto the front would actually take away from looking the building down. It's kind of monumental looking, actually. It's really nice.
Okay.
We could add it,
So then I'll withdraw the last two, but the first one, what's the downtime that
Well, that's
the
the
residents
biggest
are
part
gonna
of the
face?
work, is
So,
it's
yeah.
the one that you would bring down to the slab, more or less.
Oh, exactly, yeah, we're
So,
we're
you
slab
know,
on grade.
I'd have to really get back from a contractor. I've taken my experience, it's 6 to 9 months. At least 6 months where it's just empty.
I mean, it depends on what finishes you go with there, long lead times on your equipment, things like that. So it's really gonna depend on the decisions that are made long term as well.
And that would have to be worked out in the phasing plan, whether you can't certainly share them, you don't have the unisex, you got too many members here to do that, but you would probably, I will tell you what most facilities do, is they look at portable restrooms. They're not the greatest, but you've seen them for golf tournaments, they're not talking about portables or anything like that. They're out there, they're not that outrageous. Shopping malls do it all the time when they renovate public restrooms in shopping malls. There's these setups that were brought in, modular, and you've got the whole, you could do the lockers, sitting area, restroom, showers, all that in modules. That's usually the most practical way to do it. It's not cheap, but it lets everybody keep doing what they're doing, have access while this, because you can triple the cost of that renovation if you have to do it in phases. Because time is money, certainly, especially in that area. And that's all the slow work.
Thank you.
Well, let me ask you all on that note, if we were talking about redoing the outside bathrooms, maybe to answer your question, Bob, if we were talking about doing something a little bit smaller, because these obviously are a lot bigger.
Yeah.
With the showers and the locker rooms. Again, if you could break up these different conceptual pieces, do that first, so that those
Good
are
idea.
done and ready while these are open, and then while these are down, then you still have, hey, have new patrons out
point,
here.
April.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. That's a good, very point. Because you got all the pieces and parts there already. They're just a little packed. It's crowded. But, it certainly could be considered. And, I know it, well, I was thinking of other building, but that's what too far away. It's just not practical. It's there and it works, but it'd be quite the haul. I wouldn't want to be the guy on the phone call.
Gotta have a lot of employees going.
Yeah, I'll be back in 30 minutes. Again, what I usually see though is the portable units. And they're very common. There are a lot of folks in that business now. They set up for 6 months, 3 months, whatever you need.
So basically, as we sit here today, no easy way to put it, but our contractual obligation is basically complete. So, ball in your court. That doesn't mean we're going away. April, call me anytime. Yvonne, call me anytime. We'll work with you guys step by step, however you want to do this. If you want to mix it up, throw it back together and see what it looks like, we'll walk that road with you. We're not going to leave you empty-handed. And I know it's an awful lot to digest right now, but I think we captured a lot of what Rod said, a lot of what Yvonne said, and a lot of what April said when we walked around and everything, and kind of put it down there on a, maybe it looks like this kind of wish list. But if you guys, something pops in your head, you want to do something, you have those renderings. Neil, can we get a PDF copy?
I just sent it
Okay.
in digital of
Okay,
all the
excellent.
slides.
So you guys can play with it however
we
you
leave
want.
these boards here with you.
But our next desire would be to walk hand in hand with you and take your next mental aspect on what you want out of all this, mix it up, here's what it looks like, then go out and actually do the bid documents and, excuse me, let's get some contracting pricing in order, and then we'll really know where we are budget-wise, and then you guys can maybe, if you have to, value engineer something out, tweak it a little bit more.
I did do a time frame, but if you remember one of the original letters I think you put together, the next step would be to take these and say yes, no, bigger, smaller, no, and then you come up with a more refined plan that actually has some very specific details. That's called design development, which is development, and then you actually go from there and do the pricing documents, bid documents, you get hard numbers. Well, it is very common in these type projects, while that second phase starts, is actually, and we could help you with this, you could interview some invited contractors, you're private, and not only laws do anything, you may have your own regulations, but you invite some contractors, interview them, and go ahead and pick one of those contractors, and agree to a fee to actually run parallel to the final design while they're they're pricing it, because you're really never gonna know what it's gonna cost until they're ready to sign a contract with that amount of money. These numbers here, that's just my best guess at today. Now, a year from now, that may change a little bit. 6 months from now, it might change a little bit. It's just, but I'm not building the thing, I'm just doing this from experience. And I think let's say right now, you're gonna say, they're about within 30% accurate. You could be right on, but I'm saying that. The next phase you get down is called 10% accurate, because you've selected the floors, the ceilings, the walls, the doors, all those. I don't know what they're gonna do right now. You can have a contractor run parallel with you, so when the drawings are finished, the design, you actually got a pretty hard dollar number, and then you get what's called a permit set of drawings, which isn't a bid set, it's only a reduced quantity of information. You've already got a contractor on board, and then he starts building the day the permit's ready. You can reduce almost 4 to 6 months of that whole period by having that process done. It's very common. They do it in Florida a lot, especially in the school business, out in Orlando and those areas. It's called construction management. They have a term called construction management risk. You can Google it, you get a lot of information on it, versus what's called the design bid build, where you go through all the different traditional processes. Some of you might want to
The
consider.
good thing about that too is the contractor's starting to buy into the job. So
Yeah, absolutely.
He's starting to see the design, he has input of the design. If something doesn't work, he can let you know at that point versus bidding something that doesn't work and then change order later. So it eliminates some of that.
Well, yeah, and one of the things, and Ron and I both come from architecture, landscaping, and construction, so I can say it's qualified, but there have been times I've worked in other projects, like, got to fix a tile, and kind of that takes 9 months to get that tile, let's go look at some other tile. Well, the architect hasn't done his service to you if he's specified something, or you picked it, and you get all excited about it, and you find out it takes 9 months to get it. So you're working currently with that contractor that says, or that's a $20 square foot tile, versus look at these other two, that's a $8 square foot product, that's gonna perform just as well. It may not be exact, but those are things the contractor brings value and time to that process that can save a lot of anxiety, later on. So something you might want to consider. And I could send you, get some information about that. We've got kind of like a white paper on it that you might, something to consider. I do know it's legal, it's very popular in Florida. Again, a lot of the schools.
Huge in Texas right now.
Huge
Whether
in
they're in
Texas.
schools.
Schools especially, because time is money, especially. And time is money to you guys too. They're a little different than somebody that's in the business, like a health club, or even a YMCA or a school. But you're servicing the customer.
What'd you
Thank
think,
you.
what'd you
I
think
think-
about the design?
I like it, I think it's good, I think it's a very, very good start. I like the way that you
Thanks.
presented it, and I like the concept. Women's lounge is a little small, but. Move the door.
The wall.
By the time you get up tomorrow morning, I think I did enlarge it, bro. I'll water it on the way home and grow.
I changed it on the way
But
home.
thank you very much for coming out tonight and for doing this, it's
Yeah.
really.
Our
it's
pleasure.
really nice.
Thank y'all. Thank y'all for the opportunity.
Take about 5 minutes, 5 minute recess.
The numbers real quick. The operating revenue is at 1.8 million, 23,348. The reserves is at $976,924. The capital improvement fund is at $410,302 for a total cash of $3.2,010,574. The total cost for the reserve projects is at $25,815, so the reserve cash balance as of June 7th is $951,907. Once Gulf Atlantic and Dave Lewis and Factory Direct Furniture and Engineer Cooling are paid, that will leave a balance of a reserve cash of $752,456.11. To date, we have received 6 checks in the amount of $425, totaling $2,550 from past due assessments that went to Katzman. And as of now, we are 86 at an 86% collection assessment rate. So we've received 86% of the assessments for 2016. Committee reports? All right, unfinished business. Henry Holmes governing documents and rules violations issue. We will be tabling this to Thursday pending more information from the attorney. All right, new business. We did the BECI presentation. Item B, full dome quotes, these are for review, so no action will probably be taken tonight. But there were quotes that came in after the last board meeting in May. April went out and got some bids, working with Chris as well from the pool committee. And BDR Hospitality was one company and Cajun Contractors was the second company. BDR's quote came in at $340,689 and Cajun Contractors at $342,850. The biggest difference, in my opinion, between the two is that BDR has a much better warranty than does Cajun. So the total cost with the current amount in the capital improvement fund of $410,000, am I saying it right? $410,236. If the total came out of reserve, that would leave a balance of $60,000. However, there are certain items that are line itemed in the reserve study that would need to be replaced, and certain costs that we have already earmarked for that we could use in lieu of what they're itemed out for. So for example, the regular reserve items would be the pool dome air heater unit, which is $31,120. The pool decking, which was quoted at $75,000. The pool dome, which is in the reserve for being replaced in 2017, is $135,000. And then the pool dome heater generator, which is slated in the reserve study to be replaced in January of 2017, is $9,960. So that totals $251,000. So if we take that money and instead of purchasing those things and put it toward the pool dome, then really all we would need to take out of capital reserves or the capital improvement fund is $98,920. That's what we're looking at. Did I say all that right?
No, when you're saying pool dome, you mean the metal structure.
No, when I say pool dome, I'm saying the replacement. That's what it's listed in the reserve study as a replacement. So those items I just listed are items that we would need to be replaced within the next year. And if we use the pool dome that we have for one more year, then we will have to spend the $75,000 to get the footer redone, and then the air heater unit, and then also the heater generator. So it's something that as we look at these numbers, we can either spend this money for something that we know is probably not permanent, or apply it to a more permanent structure. But the two companies, BDR Hospitality, they've been in business for 20 years. They're licensed in 5 states. They have a structural and civil engineer on staff. And their warranty is as good as it is because they don't subcontract out any work. It's their company, their employees. And they also have a metal company, manufacturing company that they get their materials from. So their workmanship warranty would be in 3 years. The product warranty would be roof sheeting 25 years. Wall sheeting 30 years, fasteners lifetime, structural framing for 50 years. Cajun Contractors, and were you able to get the updated warranty for Cajun Contractors? They've been in business for 30 years, they're licensed in 3 states. However, they do subcontract out some of their work, so their warranty would be a workmanship warranty of 5 years, and then a product warranty of 1 year, manufacturer's warranty on the building, 20-year warranty on the paint and services.
Okay, I have a couple questions. One, I don't see where lighting is mentioned anywhere in the estimates. And yeah, there's a difference, there's a big difference as far as the warranty is concerned. And whatever it is, BDR says they would put a changing room in there at no cost. However, they don't mention a heater and a dehumidifier. Whereas, yeah, the other one does.
They do. Okay. This is the additional. Did you get the warranty paper out of your box?
You know about this?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. what we discussed as far as the drawing goes, is skylighting. And in my email that came with these, he said that they would put in up to 8 fiberglass skylights wherever we wanted them. As far as the internal lighting goes, we hadn't decided what kind of lighting and if we would need additional lighting, but he said that cost is so minimal that he would just include it in his bid. And he, again, he would remodify and include all this if it was something that we were going to move forward with. The discussion on the mechanical doors and things like that came up. So there are a couple of different things because the roof has insulation, the R13. I don't know if you've seen the last email that I sent, but the dehumidification system is a heater system as well, and that's included in the price.
For one of the bids, but not both.
For both. I mean, they're both bidding
Well, on
the same scope.
okay, so this information at the bottom refers to both bids. Is that correct?
Right.
Both have a heating system
Yes,
and
sir.
a dehumidifier.
Yes, sir.
But yeah, and the skylights are fine, but we need electrical lighting certainly also, which needs to be fairly bright, I would think.
And you said that you would include that in the quote for BDR.
He said the cost is minimal. He's already gonna have to run the electricity anyway for the dehumidifying blower system, so it's not like it would be something that they would have to add. The electrical portion should be already written in there. The skylights, again, were one of those things where they were gonna add natural lighting. He asked me what kind of lighting we had in the structure that went up, and I told him they were just standing stadium lights, and that's not really what we wanted. So then he said that he would like to have a conversation about what kind of lighting we would like to have, because you can have, obviously, the bars that are parallel that hang over the pool, which he said he wouldn't do. He said he would do something like these side-mounted ambient lights that would shine in and down on the area, because you're gonna have skylights as well.
Yeah, I just didn't see that lighting mentioned at all. And one of them would replace the concrete apron and the other would not. Is that correct?
Okay, the county has two different ways that we can approach this, and this is why this is a part. One is an exception where it has the part where what's not included in your bid. Walking out there with the contractor, he had a piece of paper from county code enforcement that said that our foundation is fine to put this structure on because the footer is fine. But if we are going to cover up where all the holes are, the top layer of that has to be skimmed and refilled and painted. So that's why it's lined out like where one says it will be taken out and redone and the surface will be repainted. The other one, he's just gonna set that whole building on top of that platform and cover up that area, because the only pieces of that deck that they need are the footers that are in each corner for wind load, and then 2 places in the middle for wind load. And those sections are already there, and they're 2 feet deep, and they have whatever rebar that we needed to have in for wind load.
So what about the areas where it's damaged from the anchors and such? They're gonna treat that?
They just think those would be covered, because see, if you look at the drawing.
Yeah.
So it's gonna go in the same location
Right. So they were going to,
that the anchors are in now, is that what you're saying?
right.
So he needs the corners and then the sides.
They're basically gonna cut out pieces that they have to cut out, fill in where the holes are, where the anchor bolts are, skim the top and paint that part. Where the building is gonna go, because the building should be sitting right on the footprint that we already have out here, based on the measurements for the building. It is to follow what's already there.
BDR says they can do it in 75 days.
Starting 5 to 7 weeks after the contract is signed. What I liked about BDR is just that they produce the material that we're using, and
It's a much better warranty. Yeah,
What was the cost per door, that hardware that need to be replaced every 5 years? What was
The mechanical cost is 5,000 per door
the
closer.
1,000 per door?
if that was electric or is that
Electric.
for the mechanic?
That's to have the manual door openers put on. What this is quoted for not manual, the mechanical, automatic door openers to roll these up, to push a button and that part is not this. These are manual roll-up doors.
And they're $5,000 a piece, 8 doors that need to be replaced every 5 years. If I'm understanding what you said earlier.
For the mechanism itself, to enable. Yeah,
If it's manual, that's not a replacement cost.
that's right.
But what is the replacement cost if it is manual? What's the life cycle of the mechanism if it's not electric, it's manual?
If it's manual,
It
it's-
would certainly
I
be
mean,
much
the
longer
hardware,
than 5 years.
the hardware's gonna wear down and, corrode up.
I can ask, let me ask the
Yeah,
question.
yeah.
Just so we know what our annual maintenance budget is.
You're talking pulleys and chains and
Yeah.
stuff rather than,
Mhm.
the 5-year replacement's electric, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I wouldn't realize it was electric.
And this looks like, something's doable to me.
I think so, I didn't understand.
Now,
$1 million.
There's gonna be, a period of time that those facilities are not gonna be used.
Well, in her email, that's what she said, if it's timed right, you can do it during the winter or leading into the winter and then just heat the family pool. You wouldn't put the dome on it, obviously, the inflatable one, but, 75 days, once they start, and that's 2.5 months. So during the winter season, your swim team would have to swim outside,
You just heat
but it would be heated.
the family pool and on the panhandle floor.
Well, there's probably not a perfect time. I mean, if you wanted to push it.
No, I know, there's nowhere around.
You'd wanna, push it till after
Yeah.
the dome's getting ready to come back down, but,
And people would just understand, have to understand there's no other way to do it.
The best time to do it would be December, January.
Sure. Well, that makes sense.
November, December, January, you've got the holidays, you don't have to make using it as you normally would. So that February, March is ready to go. So,
Move that to Thursday. Or should we? Move that?
I'd like to move this to Thursday.
Okay. Well, yeah. I want to make this a little closer.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, the concrete footer discussion, I think, given that we're moving item B to Thursday, C is probably mute.
it depends on the decision you make.
Mute.
So you still will have to make a decision on that based off what other decision you make.
Motion to move that to Thursday pending the other decision.
Second,
Aye.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we're gonna take care of this one tonight, it's a caregiver usage.
Just one quick question. We haven't made any moves yet on the blower and all that, have we? No contract.
The caregiver usage waivers of 7636 Manatee Street, we have a family member who is wanting to use provision 7 of the usage policy to allow a 13-year-old to provide care for 3 young children at the rec center, given that this is not in keeping with provision 7, and also that a 13-year-old cannot be here unaccompanied with other children. I make a motion to deny the caregiver usage waiver for 7636 Manatee Street.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, open forum.
Patricia Howe, 2792 Camden Drive. You talked about 2 proposals on the dome. Did I hear correct? 2 different. one of the proposals mentioned painting the concrete. If you've ever been in your flip-flops and the depth markers are painted, they are so slick. Have you thought about that?
Well, it would be non-slip paint,
Oh,
It's a
then
full deck.
why aren't full deck, depth markers non-slip paint also?
You're not supposed to.
I don't have the answer to that question. Well, if they painted the pool deck, it would be non-slip paint.
When you're in a pool, it's designed for swimming, so those lanes